Think your job is bad? Imagine waking up every day knowing you'll be swimming literally in human waste, or scraping rotting flesh off corpses just to earn a single coin. In medieval times, work wasn't just hard. It was pure agony. From rat catchers who risked disease in every bite, to leech collectors who bled themselves for a living, these were real jobs, and they were nightmarish. Forget boring office desks. How about being a Gong farmer, toiling knee-deep in centuries of sewage, or a sin-eater, feasting on cursed meals meant to absorb the dead sins? These weren't just jobs, they were punishment disguised as work, and the worst part, people volunteered for them because the alternative was often starvation or death. Brace yourself as we uncover 12 medieval jobs so gruesome, so disturbing, they make modern work look like luxury. Welcome to the brutal, foul, smelling, and forgotten world of history's most torturous professions. This is dark history. Imagine living in a world where you didn't get to choose a career. Your only choice was work something awful or starve. In medieval times, there was no safety net, no days off, and definitely no dream jobs. Survival came at a steep, often disgusting price. For the poorest, the jobs nobody else wanted, filthy, dangerous, soul-crushing work, were often the only way to stay alive. And these weren't just physically brutal, they were humiliating, social death. Your neighbors might need you, but they'd never look you in the eye. People took jobs that meant crawling through sewers, touching corpses, even eating food placed on the dead. These weren't fringe cases. They were part of daily life, because if you didn't do them, someone else would and you'd go hungry. Or worse, get locked up for vagrancy, or sent to war. So the next time you complain about your boss or your hours, just remember, medieval workers were literally drowning in excrement, bleeding into swamps, or burying plague victims without even knowing what a virus was. They didn't just hate their jobs. They suffered through them to not die. And the craziest part, some of them thought they were lucky to have the work at all. Now, if you think your job stinks, try being a Gong farmer . Sounds weird, right? But in medieval England, this was an actual job title. And trust me, it was just as awful as it sounds. These were the men paid to clean out cesspits, huge underground holes filled with years, sometimes decades of human waste. No plumbing, no gloves, just a shovel, a bucket, and the overwhelming smell of rot and filth that could knock a man out cold. Gong farmers worked at night not because it was cooler or more peaceful, but because the stench was so unbearable in daylight. People demanded it be done after dark. And if you fell in, that was it. Game over. The toxic fumes alone were enough to suffocate you, and the pit walls, slick, slimy, and impossible to climb. Some men were found days later dead, soaked, and buried in the very thing they were paid to remove. But get this, despite the horror, the pay was actually decent because no one else wanted the job. These guys were walking health hazards, shunned by society, yet essential to keeping entire towns from drowning in their own filth. It's one thing to have a dirty job. It's another to be literally knee-deep in human waste, praying you don't inhale too hard. And yet, night after night, they showed up because if they didn't, the whole city would rot right along with them. Let's say you're desperate for money, and someone offers you a few coins to go wade into a swamp and let dozens of bloodthirsty creatures latch onto your legs. Sounds insane, right? Welcome to the life of a medieval leech collector. This wasn't some weird side hustle. It was a real job. These workers, usually women or the elderly, would wade barefoot into cold, murky waters and just stand there waiting for leeches to find them and sink in. The more leeches that attached, the better the haul. But here's the catch: leeches don't just bite and leave. They hang on, they suck until they're full. And doing this every day meant constant blood loss, infections, and open wounds that never really had time to heal. Some collectors would pass out from anemia, others got sick from the swamp water itself, but what choice did they have? Leech therapy was all the rage. Doctors used them for everything from headaches to fevers to treating the plague. And who was supplying those precious leeches? The people literally bleeding in the bog, forgotten by everyone except the apothecaries who paid them just enough to crawl back into the water the next day. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't safe, it was cold, wet, and painful, but when your options are get bitten for a living or go hungry, you let the bloodsuckers win. Now here's a job that's creepy on a whole different level. Imagine being paid to eat food that's been placed asterisk on a corpse asterisk. Not beside it, asterisk on asterisk it. That's what sin eaters did. Their job was to absorb the sins of the dead literally, by consuming bread or ale that had been rested on the deceased person's chest or face. The belief was that sin could pass from the soul into the food, and from the food into the sin eater. It was seen as a kind of spiritual cleanup. Families would hire a sin eater to show up at the funeral, take the food, say a quick chant, and scarf it down in silence. No talking, no questions, just eat the guilt. The dead got a cleaner soul, and the living could sleep better at night. But for the sin eater, it was a curse. People avoided them in public. They were seen as spiritually polluted walking bags of other people's darkness. They were paid in scraps, coins if they were lucky. Most lived alone, shunned by society, but needed just enough to stay alive. And no priest would ever give them a blessing, ever. So while the town mourned and the family prayed, the sin eater sat in the shadows chewing the sins of a stranger, adding another soul's weight to their own, and all for a bite of cursed bread and a coin no one else would touch. There's a reason plague doctors wore those terrifying bird masks. They weren't trying to be creepy. They were just trying to survive. During outbreaks of the Black Death and other deadly plagues, someone had to handle the sick, the dying, and the already dead. That someone was usually a plague doctor or corpse handler, and make no mistake, this was a death sentence disguised as a profession. Plague doctors weren't always trained medical experts. Many were just desperate men willing to risk it all for a paycheck. Their iconic masks were stuffed with herbs and spices, meant to filter the deadly air, which, of course, didn't work. These doctors would walk through streets lined with corpses, poke at blackened flesh, drain infected boils, and haul away bodies, all while being completely unaware of how the disease actually spread. And then there were the corpse handlers, gravediggers, cart pullers, men who physically moved the bodies. Day after day, they'd toss plague victims into pits so full that bodies would spill out. No gloves, no disinfectant, just the hope that today wouldn't be the day they coughed. They were vital to public health. But nobody thanked them. People crossed the street to avoid them, when their asterisk was asterisk, a street to cross. Most didn't live long enough to be remembered. These were men who stared death in the face every single day, then went home hoping they wouldn't carry it back with them. And most of the time they did. If you think being the boss means power and respect, try being a medieval executioner. Sure, they had authority. They swung the sword, dropped the noose, lit the fire, but respect not even close. These men were feared, hated, and avoided like the plague, literally. People believed touching an executioner could curse you. Even if he was just grabbing bread at the market, no one would hand it to him directly. They'd place it down and back away. And yet someone asterisk had asterisk to do it. Beheadings, hangings, torture sessions, these weren't rare events. Justice in the Middle Ages was brutal and public, and executioners were expected to put on a show. But if the blade missed, if the rope snapped, if the condemned screamed too long, that shame didn't fall on the system. It fell on the executioner. Most didn't choose the job. It was passed down through families, inherited like a curse. Sons of executioners became executioners themselves, whether they wanted to or not. They were allowed to live, but always on the edge of society, often in homes built outside the town walls. They had blood on their hands, sometimes literally, and even priests were hesitant to offer them final rites. They were needed, essential even, but never welcomed. So while the crowd cheered or cringed at every swing of the axe, the man holding it lived a life of silence, shame, and isolation. Because even in death, no one wanted to stand too close to the one who delivered it. They weren't heroes. They weren't villains. They were just desperate souls doing whatever it took to survive in a world that didn't care if they lived or died. From wading through human waste to swallowing the sins of strangers, these weren't just jobs. They were punishments disguised as paychecks. In a time when death lurked in every corner, survival came at the cost of dignity, health, and even your soul. So the next time you clock in and groan about Mondays, remember, at least you're not knee deep in a cesspit, bleeding in a swamp, or choking on plague fumes. These were the 12 medieval jobs that were more than just hard work. They were actual torture, and someone had to do them. This is the side of history most people don't want to remember. But here we never forget.